Okay, I'd like to introduce you to our next guest, Nev Fant. We had a 5-minute conversation about what we were going to talk about.
Yes.
Most of which we've probably both forgotten.
Yes.
Good, that's the way we like to do it. First of all, tell us about yourself. Who is Nev Fant?
Well, I'll talk about myself, and I'll talk about all the things I've done, and then I'll put in a sort of science fiction slant on it, so you can sort of help you through. Well, I'm a comedy writer. I've done radio, television, stage, all manner of things. I started off in radio. My main claim to fame was Dead Ringers, when I was a main writer on Dead Ringers and script editor. Of course, the science fiction angle of that, of course, is the Tom Baker calls and John Coltrane's impressions and ringing up the doctors and having a little fun with that. And I was very happy to have David Tennant on the final ever episode, who I asked personally, because he got me on Doctor Who Confidential and John on Doctor Who Confidential to talk about being fans. Because obviously I am a fan, and I wandered into Doctor Who by accident from there, because around about 2000, Your Death Comes to Time, a script editor, which was the Sylvester McCoy thing, the webcast, which just came out just before. That was an amazing time when that came out and got 1 million hits, and then everyone went bananas. And then Big Finish got Paul McGann, and then the TV series got announced. So that was kind of like a fantastic, staggering year. So that's my claim to fame on that. And what else? I've done Big Finish. I've done 3 Big Finishes. I've done Omega, I've done The Kingmaker, and Perion and Piscon Paradox. And currently I've written 3 books for Big Finish, of which more later. And I'm dating Nicola Bryant. Okay, so that's I put that out there.
Yeah, that's
okay. That's the elephant.
Anybody who didn't know that?
Okay.
Yeah, see,
she's my partner.
Yeah.
So okay.
Why didn't you bring her along?
Because she's a bit busy at the moment. It's quite a journey, actually. She's actually doing some music. She's doing a big Doctor Who themed concert up in north somewhere, and this guy's composer. He wrote a song called Perry's Song about 20 years ago, and it's just been sitting there on a tape and in music. And this guy works with Colin Baker, and Colin does the lyrics to his stuff, and he wants to do a Doctor Who themed concert with Sophie doing her thing and Colin doing. And he met Nicola and said to you, and he was just bowled over by her compositional skills. She is just a fantastic singer-songwriter. And you heard Perry's song, and he's made a full orchestral version of it with a brass band and an orchestra, and that's been performed on the 3rd of December up north. I can't remember honestly where, but it's up north.
You're really not sounding very well.
I'm not.
You're supposed to know exactly where, how much.
What was it? My mind's a blank. I'm like Rick Perry. I can't remember the. She's got.
I'm sure you'll find out
it's
tomorrow.
North of Newcastle. I think it's Newcastle-ish.
You're going to give her a ring tonight,
yeah.
and you're going to
text her.
Text her. Not now. Not during.
If you all follow me on Twitter, I'll tell you later on. Okay.
So
anything you want to?
Probably right 12 years.
Yeah, 13. Oh, yes, I do Private Eye as well. I'm a main writer on Private Eye. There's not much Doctor Who about that apart from the big spat with the Doctor Who production team, but that's the journalism side. I have nothing to do with that.
So, what did you do before you became a comic, and how did you get into the writing?
I was all manner of things. I was a student. I was a teacher. I worked in a toy shop. I worked in Hamleys for 2 years. I did all kinds of things, and then I sent a couple of scripts to a Radio 4 show called Weekending, which the older people know was a kind of open door show, satirical show, which ran about 93 weeks a year. And you turned up with your plastic bag and your cagoule, and you sat down in a meeting room, and they told you that the stories they might want to cover. And if you were good, you stayed, and if you weren't, you picked up your plastic bag and you went away again. And the good writers eventually came through, and they got a commission, they got a small commission, and you became a commissioned writer, which was like a 2-tier thing. So I started off just throwing sketches into there, and by the end of the series I was only about an 8-minute commission. And then that died. It got destroyed by James Bourne when he took over. It was a popular show amongst the listeners, but it wasn't very well loved in the department because it wasn't owned by anyone. And then Dead Ringers was it's our answer. And again, I just went along and said, can I write for it? By series 2, my writing partner and I were writing about 40–50% of it, and by series 3 we were 80–90%, and the script editors on it. It was quite difficult to find writers for it. So when that moved to television, we moved to television. So it all kind of moved like that, really. Radio, television, the normal way writers do. I did write a couple of stage plays. The first one was called My Grandmother Was a Time Lord, funnily enough, which was meant to be my Armadacon fire, about being a child and growing up and thinking that your grandmother's a Time Lord, as you do. And just to being about a boy and about youth and about being into Doctor Who and then growing up and not being into Doctor Who and then reconciling yourself to the idea that you still like Doctor Who. Put that on in '95 at the Canal Cafe in Little Venice, and I did that, yeah. So that's me.
That's it.
Yeah.
And you're going over. So have we mentioned? Yeah, we didn't cover that very much at all. So, big finish. Both the radio and the books.
Yeah.
Strict introduction.
Yeah.
Current.
What would you like to say about Big how I got to start with Big Finish? I was doing Death Comes to Time, and Gary Russell emailed me out of the blue because he'd been told about me. I had no contact with Doctor Who at that time. I was doing the Dead Ringers thing. And then Death Comes to Time came along, but I just asked if I could get involved. It was just work. And Gary emailed me and said, I'm doing this villains trilogy, can you do Omega? And I was very excited about that. And then I did Omega, and then I pitched Kingmaker, and then Perry and this called Paradox. But I was really wanting to get into books. I really, really love murder mysteries. And I had these books, this book idea floating around for quite a few years back. I was a big fan of, don't know if you know the Charles Paris books by Simon Brett. It's an actor detective. They're sort of comedy crime books. You know, they're light-hearted. He's an actor detective called Charles Paris, and every book is a different aspect of his career. You know, he does a fringe play, someone dies. He does a corporate video, someone dies. He works on a sitcom, someone dies.
Why do people hire?
It's suspension of disbelief. Your willing suspension of disbelief.
It's a bit like living in Cabot Cove. Nobody wants to go live in Cabot Cove. They die.
That's the convention. The convention. So I thought I liked that. I wanted to write about something I knew, because I knew that the Dead Ringers thing was going to come to an end. I wanted to do something else, and I thought I'd like to write murder mysteries. What do I know about? I've done a few conventions. I've done Death Comes. Through Death Comes Time, I got invited to all manner of places, to Los Angeles, Manchester. Wow, what Los Angeles, Manchester. So I had the idea of a script editor detective. A script editor detective whose science fiction show was on in the 80s, sort of like in that bit when Doctor Who got cancelled. I imagined that they actually did commission a new science fiction series, sort of like a Dynasty in space. And that ran for about 7 series and then died. And then this guy's career died along with it. And all he does is go to conventions, do DVD commentaries, do signings. So basically the only things he's paid to write now as a writer are the words best wishes of Mervyn Stoney or on merchandise. So I said to Joe, and about the time I was pitching it, and it wasn't getting any traction with the big publishers because well, it's you know, we don't do science fiction, we don't do science fiction comedy, that doesn't sell. Apart from one publisher who says, well, we do science fiction, but this isn't science fiction, is it? This is about a man who used to write a science fiction show. So I was caught right in the middle of 2 stools. And then Jason heard, because he wanted Jason Hageller, head of Big Finish, heard, he wanted to get in books. And then David Richardson said, ooh, Ned wants to write a book. And then someone said to me, oh, Jason wants to publish a book. So I had a deal with Jason, and they said, like, I want to do 3. I want to do 3 books. I want to do a range of books, because this is how people consume their entertainment these days. I don't watch an episode of True Blood. I buy a box set. So I want to do 3 books instantly, so you have an instant rate. If you like book 1, you can go straight on to book 2 and book 3. So I want to do all 3. He said, okay, I want 3 by the summer. So that's going to be 6 months to write 3 books. So I went home I said to Nicola, I've just been permission to write 3 books within 6 months, so bye. So I sat down at her mother's desk and just started typing, and I fell asleep. I just typed and typed and typed. And I finished book 3. This is book 1, which is the Murder Center Science Fiction Convention, Geek Tragedy. Book 2, DVD extras include murder, which is an impossible murder, which is a murder during the recording of a DVD commentary, which is quite amusing. I actually did some research for this. I actually attended the DVD recordings of K9 Company in the time. So I watched Terence Dix and Eric Saywood at work on their commentaries. And book 3 is the ill-fated revival of the old science fiction show, made in Cornwall, because it's like Wales, but not. By made by an American company that great Rob Zoll TV series called Lazarus Media. So those are my 3 books, and I say I wrote them. I had a lot. I say, but I had a lot prepared. I'd written chunks of each, actually, and a bit of this, bit of that. I went home and actually started writing book 3 straight away because that's the only one I hadn't actually written a word of. And I did that for 2 months, and I sort of fell asleep at keyboard, as I said, with QWERTY or UQuoc. Yeah. So I finished that, then went back to book 1, finished that, and then finished book 2 last, which was a bit of a tangle. If you like, I can read some to you.
Yes.
Would you like me to read some?
There's a lot of big rings here, so go.
Okay. I'll read an introduction to Mervyn, because this is amusing, because we did a big launch at Dimensions. This is quite funny. And Nicola is a huge supporter of my work because she thinks it's great, and got Nicola to read some passages of the book. So there's 200 people at this convention, and we're reading these passages about a shit convention and how shit the hotel is and everything. And the hotel wasn't very good. I mean, it was okay, but it was cold because this was in Newcastle, and they don't feel the cold in Newcastle. So it was October or November, and the air conditioner was up. We did a celebrity lunch, and the balloons they had tied to the tables were like that. They were blowing across the table because this, and we're in coats, and it wasn't a bad convention, and it was the hotel looked nice, but it was out of the way, and it was freezing cold. And Nicola's reading this thing about this terrible hotel, and everyone's just falling about laughing. So I will read. The Happy Traveller Hotel was tucked behind a slip road somewhere around the M25. It was a modern hotel, a square, ugly building in orange and yellow brick. The only difference between it and an open prison was that the hotel had a bigger sign, smaller rooms, and palm trees in the carpet. The reason why hotels wedged in such sweaty rectums of the country decorated themselves with palm trees always eluded Mervyn, presumably to entice the kind of person who gets impressed by pineapple and ham on pizza. The carpet that Mervyn jogged along was from the same identikit book of bland hotels. It was covered in a pattern of vomit-coloured splat shapes arranged about 10 inches apart, designed that should anything vomit-coloured and splat-shaped descend upon it, the mess would be cunningly disguised. Unfortunately, as no one has ever yet to vomit precisely 10 inches apart, even engineering undergraduates, the nastiness usually showed up anyway. Why was he running? Because he was special. Not special in many respects, of course. He was in his late 40s, hovering on the wrong side of stout, with soft, perplexed features and a large nose. Middle-aged, mercifully left him his hair, which was grey and thick, and grew in every conceivable direction but down. Mervyn looked like a hedge that had been dragged through a man backwards. His dress wasn't particularly exceptional either. He wore the standard uniform of television writers everywhere. Black jeans, black shirt, and black corduroy jacket. There were certain writers' panels he'd been on in years past that looked more like a convention of retired and rather portly milk tray men. The ones who'd skipped the speedboat, given up on the sexy lady, and kept the chocolates to themselves. No, he wasn't special, not in any respect, except one. Mervyn had Vixens from the Void on his CV, and that made him very special indeed. The Happy Traveller had played host to a lot of strange and wonderful gatherings in its history, but this particular event took the complimentary plastic wrap biscuit. The convention, known as Convix, had been in existence for 15 years now. It was a convention devoted to many forms of cult television. For this event, there were a smattering of Tomorrow People cast members, a few lookless red-shirted extras from Star Trek, and one rather dog-eared space rebel from Blake 7. But mostly, Convix was concerned with celebrating the exploits of the Vixens from the Void. Mervyn had co-devised and scripted a brazenly cheap and exploitative piece of sci-fi kitsch that cast a day-glow spell over the BBC One schedules in the late 80s to early 90s. In the mid-80s, TV sci-fi was unfashionable at the BBC. Doctor Who had been prescribed a rest, Blake 7 had been tragically cancelled, and the tripods had been even more tragically made. It would have been suicide to propose another space series in this climate, but BBC drama, with that appetite for suicide shared by most publicly funded organisations, decided to make one. Mervyn came up with an epic that contained elements of classic BBC serials such as I, Claudius and Fall of Eagles, but on a much larger scale, recounting the decline and fall of a vast intergalactic empire through infighting, betrayal and war. This wasn't how he pitched it to the BBC, of course, and he wasn't completely mad. He sold it shamelessly like a whore, dressing it in primary colours and daubing it with cheap lipstick, showing it off in a way that would make sense to the brain of the average BBC boss. He winced as he remembered the first line of his proposal document. Think of Dallas meets Dynasty, but in space. Mervyn reasoned that even if they didn't understand science fiction, they might at least understand science fiction containing nubile young women in corsets and skin-tight lycra a little better. He wasn't alone in pitching the sci-fi series, not by a long shot. There was also I see this as Howard's Way, but in space. Imagine the kids from Fame, but in space. And then it's like the Money Programme, but in space. Mervyn couldn't imagine how that one could have worked. He'd even heard of one old and rather baffled producer who went into the meeting with the words, think Star Trek, but in space. There you go, that's it. I'll read through it from the other two books if you like, a bit later on.
Yeah, I'll be coming and giving you some other.
Has anyone got any questions?
Yes, I was going to throw it up. Come on, there must be somebody who wants anything.
About dead ringers or anything? Or? Yeah.
Well, two questions then. One on dead ringers. Was that because that was fairly topical at the time?
Yeah.
Did you have like a limited amount of time to write that with the events? Because you were fairly up to date with all the events with different characters.
Radio was the toughest, and we kind of started from scratch each week. We wrote it in about 48 hours. There's probably a reason why my writing partner and I wrote a lot of it, because we really got geared up and we wrote a lot of stuff very quickly. We had a few ideas, because when you're a satirical writer, you have an idea where the news is going to go. You always know there's going to be silly stories in the summer. You always knew there's going to be a lot of ridiculous polls and scientific studies that you know eating chocolate kills you, or drinking red wine makes you taller. All that kind of nonsense happens in the summer. You know there's going to be conference season. You know all that kind of thing. So you have signposts where you can go. But the radio was very intense. Television was less intense because we did it in sort of three sections. We did stuff for the whole series, pre-recorded stuff, all location filming and stuff like that. That was like, they're bringing back Hustle. So let's do some Hustle sketches. So we recorded those nicely in advance, and we had some blocks of filming and did that. And then when it got nearer, then we did some more topical sketches. And on the week, then we did some studio stuff. We did the Newsnight sketches, we did the Greg Dyke things, we did George Bush at the podium. We had those things that were very, very topical. So we'd come in Sunday morning and literally write new sketches. So that's the third bit. The second bit was during the week, and the third bit was actually on the Sunday morning when actually things did actually break quite a lot. It was quite exciting actually, because I think there was a spectacularly bad football match where they lost, where England just choked in the last minute, and we were actually doing the show in front of the audience, and we ran around with a topical joke for Fiona Bruce to do while the show was on. It was very exciting. The audience really, really responded more to the topical stuff because that's immediate. They're performing to an audience rather than just showing it on a screen. And audiences just seem to like the idea that things are being written for them because they know. You know, Tony Blair did this on Tuesday, and this sketch about it was written. I know it was written in the last 48 hours, so I'm quite excited by it. Which was the reason why we recorded a lot of we did a lot of pre-recorded stuff. You know, lovely, beautiful things in fields and stuff, and months in advance. But the stuff that got on more was always the topical stuff because we got such a response from the audience. So we had so much stuff left over. We planned for about 10 minutes. Topical stuff, but it went so well. We got 20 minutes. Wretched Frosts, we did those in the studio in front of the audience, the topical stuff. Did the Fiona Bruce lines and the Sophie Rayworth lines. news nights, Tony Blair's. You know, we tried to do as much as we possibly could, try to be as ambitious as we possibly could in the studio on the night. So yeah, it was quite intense.
I really enjoyed the radio series.
The radio series was a good. You can get away more with the radio because you can't see anything, so there's that thing. And radio probably like having the Mickey taken out of it. It was the kind of like the like the works party. It was like a roast thing, you know, the Perkinses and the Charlottes, and they loved doing it. They loved hearing it, and you always get people coming up in parties saying how much they enjoy it.
They created some monsters almost.
It was Brian Perkins with the
Brian Perkins, yes.
Brian Perkins
That
with
was, I remember hearing that a few times.
Brian Perkins did, right? The Libby Purvis did. Ned Sherring was a little bit. That was kind of what, because we were writing loose ends gags. Ned, if he was mentioned on the show or he personally done the show, he'd always mention it on loose ends. And he knew we wrote most of it. He knew we wrote his monologue at the same time, but we never actually said anything about it directly. But he was very aware. So we kind of pulled away. It's that kind of conflict thing when you do a lot of jobs and someone just says, well, write me an Ian Hislop sketch, really get to him. We write Private Eye, he's our boss. We get paid a lot of money. We're not dissing Ian Hislop, we like him. There's that kind of conflict that always happens when you do a lot of work and your job is to be satirical and quite acerbic. And there's that thing, you get this clash. It's like being caught in the middle with this Doctor Who debacle when Private Eye was doing a lot of stuff on the Doctor Who cancellation and what's going to happen next year. I'm completely not a part of it, but people know my name in association with Private Eye. And a lot of people are coming to me and say, well, what's Private Eye doing? I don't know, I'm not a journalist. I don't know. And what's this war of words that's going on? What's the story? I said, I don't know. And you know, it's a small world. Once you get into the industry, when you get into satire or get into comedy, it's smaller than you think, and everything rebounds on something else. So, yeah, what was the question? Can't remember.
Did you have another one?
Yeah, I have another one. I mean, when you're writing the Mervyn Stone novelisations, do you write it just for a book, or do you think, oh, that would make a good audio, or audio play, or when you start?
I really write for the medium that I'm writing for. I try and think of an idea that I can only do in that medium, and if you know my stuff, if you've ever heard it, all my big finishes are really geared towards the audio medium. Only works as an audio. I think Kingmaker only works as an audio. Perry and the Piscon Paradox I approached saying, okay, the Companion Chronicles is all about a companion's perspective, and it's about their internal thoughts. So it can really only work if you hear the older Perry's internal thoughts at the end of episode 4. It can't work as a full-cast audio. A lot of people go, well, it should have been a full-cast audio. There should have been Peter Davison in it. It should have been a full-cast audio because Colin Baker's in it. It could only work as a first-person narrative telling the story. And when I approach these books, I think I add things into them. I do little timetables and things like that. They asked me to write a Mervyn Stone audio, and I'm tearing my hair out, trying to think of something which is related to sound, that's a good mystery, that hooks on sound. And a lot of the clues in the Mervyn Stone are related to print. So they are quite difficult to actually convert to other ones. But I do really think about the medium that I did one Doctor Who comic strip, and I really geared it towards the David Tennant era, because I did I did like a game show in the Doctor Who magazine. It was all like a one-episode thing. So I had Mickey in it, and I had Rose Tyler's mum. So I did something that you can only do with that Doctor and not anyone else. I did it with the 10th Doctor family, the Russell T Davies family. So yeah, I really think very hard. So once you actually say, oh, that'll make a good audio, I go, well, how can I do that? Because I've thought of it so much in terms of a book, it's going to be difficult. Not impossible, but I do really think these are books. Though having said that, I did do a little podcast, a half an hour Mervyn Stone thing, which I particularly geared towards as a DVD extra. He sold a murder in half an hour, and that was to advertise the books. You might have seen it. It was on the Big Finish site, you can still hear it. It's little 3-minute episodes, and he basically sold the murder of the guy who played the robot in Series 6 in half an hour. And it's all done framed as a DVD thing with Nick Briggs doing the narration. That was nice. But that was geared towards that format.
It's a bit like the Hitchhiker novelisations which returned to audio, and you could see they was really struggling to convert them to the audio.
Oh yeah,
medium.
yeah. He was very good. I mean, you could go radio to book, couldn't you, quite easily? Because he has that very kind of. But once you get the book, because I think Douglas was going, yeah, I'm writing books now. And then once he got from Life of the Universe, the last two, he was really writing novels. But oddly enough, Life of the Universe didn't do as well on radio as I thought as So Long and Thanks for All the Fish, because it was a simpler story. It actually worked better on radio than Life of the Universe for some reason. And you'd expect Life of the Universe, because it was so kind of in the Hitchhiker style, to be just like the first two series. But I don't know, that was just a personal thing for me. I thought So Long and Thanks for All the Fish worked better as the radio adaptation. But you know, it's odd when you try and move things back the other way.
It's not so straightforward.
It's not so straightforward. Not so straightforward at all. And it's probably why Douglas basically started the story again when he got to a new medium, like with film. So let's start again, and let's go through what works and what doesn't, and let's try and gear this. I don't think the film worked. I don't think it worked as a film at all. And there's only so many mediums you can tell that story in, and I think we were very lucky with Douglas's skill as a writer for the books, and we were very lucky, despite Douglas's opinions about the director and the producer on the television series, to have that. I thought it worked very well as a television series. I know Douglas had his doubts about it. I think he was wrong. I think it worked extremely well within the limitations of the BBC budget, because it made you do things. I think you throw too much money at something, it can drown something. And when he starts, and it was written as a radio series, so it's an intimate medium. And that's a thing that a lot of people make a mistake. When you go to radio, with the Doctor Who thing, when you started on doing the Big Finish, a lot of people said, well, we can do thousands and thousands of dialects, we can do anything, because we can't see, so it's going to be fantastic. But radio is a more intimate medium. You use less characters, you use less sets, because you lose where you are in radio, because you can't see where they are. So actually, if you made a lot of the Big Finishes into television, they'd probably cost less than they would have done than the original series. I certainly think Omega, very intimate, just a couple of actors, you know, one space station set really, and that was it. But I say I don't think you can make that to a television series because I'd give it to me. But yes, that's a very good question. I think a lot about the differences, and as I say, I try not to think about, oh, this would make a good this would make. I just write the book. I write the book for the book's sake. I even sort of add in things that you can only get in the book, because I want people to not just go, oh, I'll get that from the library. I write the Big Finish audios in the way that I do. I want someone to stop, to finish this audio and listen to it again from the start. I want them, if they're spending 12 quid on this, I want them to feel that they own something, that they've not just picked something up, spent their 12 quid, and they're going to put it down again, and they're not going to listen to it again until it, well, or again, ever. Just stick it in the jumble or whatever, just stick it on a shelf. I want people to go, God, I want to listen to that again. I want to give you something. And with these as well, I've put little convention timetables and little things around the text. So you go, I actually want to own this, because I look at the details in between the chapters, and I go, I don't want to just read this in the library. I want to own this. I want to think my money is well spent. And I want to read it again, and hopefully that's the main aim I ever have with all my writing.
You mentioned drowning in something in money, which wasn't going to ask about it. In the bit of Stone which you read out, you made reference to tripods. How much do you think the target audience of books are going to be the sort of people who will get that reference?
Good question.
For what it's worth, I thought the problem with tripods was it was being drowned in money.
I put in jokes. I think everything I do, I put in jokes. Johnny Morris once said a good thing, like, in jokes which aren't funny. And a joke has got to work on several levels. there are a lot of in-jokes in The Kingmaker and a lot of in-jokes in Perry the Physical Paradox, but it has to work for the average person as well, who's just reading it and who knows nothing about nothing. And I've had people reading these books who don't know a lot about science fiction, but know that this is funny. You might think it's, yeah, oh yeah, I know the tripods, I know the series, I know the history, and I think it's funny, but actually, unbeknownst to you, someone who doesn't know a lot about this thinks it's funny too, because even if they've never heard the tripods, they can sense. Which is like when you watch an American sitcom and someone makes a reference, but the joke's still funny, even though you haven't seen it or you don't know the reference. You go, oh yes, the rhythm of the joke, the construct of the joke, I know that's funny, and I'm laughing at it, even though I don't know what they're talking about. I don't know what they're talking about, Herschenbach. I don't know what they're talking about this obscure television series. I can get it, and that's the thing. An in-joke is an in-joke is an in-joke, and you can just make a reference to something, and that makes 10 people laugh. But a joke that actually works on every level. There's quite a good joke in Kingmaker, which I'm very glad about, because that's an in-joke which also works as a joke on a general sense. Which when we did the John Coleshaw in the Kingmaker before Tom Baker agreed to do Big Finish, we didn't have Tom Baker obviously, and I said let's have John Coleshaw do this for a joke. Let's have Peter Davison find an old dictaphone in which he's recorded his old books, his research for this book, and it's Tom Baker's voice. So I go, that's funny in a lot of ways, and Perry says it doesn't sound much like you, because obviously it sounds nothing like you. It sounds like Tom Baker, or sounds like John Custer or Tom Baker. And Peter says, well, when you record yourself on tape, it never does it? Now that is a joke that a Doctor Who fan will get, but that's a joke that anyone will get, anyone on any level, and that's the perfect joke for me. A joke that's just so brilliant, it's as good as an in-joke and good as a general joke. My favourite ever meta in-joke, which is so clever, was in Third Rock from the Sun, where William Shatner's guest starring. And this is a pure in-joke, and I would never write this one, but it just shows you how American television never patronises its audience, unlike the television here. William Shatner's playing the big giant head. He flies in to see the family, John Lithgow in it, and John Lithgow says, did you have a good flight? And William Shatner said, no, there was something on the wing of the plane. And John Lithgow goes, oh, that happened to me! Now, you're laughing at this, you know this. This is down to 2 Twilight Zone versions of the same version. When John Lithgow plays William Shatner's part, no one's going to get it. But that's an in-joke for in-joke's sake. I'm saying don't write that, but that's a brilliant in-joke. Because I love that so much, I'd probably want to write it anyway, even though it makes no sense to anyone else. But I think the best in-jokes, and I know you take your point about the tripods, I think it gets less in-jokey as the books go along, because I'm really kind of fishing it. And I think this one has got references to Russell T Davies in it, it's got Nick Briggs in it, it's even got Steve O'Brien from SFX magazine, but they're all playing characters which you know on any level. The guy who does the voice of the monsters, the person who's following the crew around trying to do a story. So I'm very, very aware of in-jokes, because a lot of things, I think some in-jokes are very, very lazy. So I try, if I ever do an in-joke, I want to do it. I've done too much. You know what I mean? Good question.
Death comes to time, Nick. Don't want to bring it out. But
Yeah.
Death comes to time. What was the actual journey of that production? Where was it actually meant to go after the end of it?
I don't know what was in Dan Friedman's mind. I was working on Dead Ringers. I was squatting in an office, and someone had put a sign on the door next door with Doctor Who written on it, Death Comes to Time. And I heard that Dan was producing it. And I said, well, would you like to, can I be your scientific advisor? Because I want to, I really want to be involved in the Doctor Who project. It was literally set up next door to me. He said, yeah, I was thinking of using someone else, but yeah, I'll do that. And we had this journey. It was pitched as a radio series, a Radio 4 series, and we had a full pilot. And I worked quite extensively on that first episode, because we had a huge long lead-in time with the luxury of this, a luxury of what to do. But I was at the mercy of the right. I was only advising. I wasn't a script writer with a capital S and a capital E. I was just saying, you really, really should do this. And if the writer didn't want to do it, didn't have. I think I had more time to influence the writer over the pilot and actually talk about structure and things. So the rest of it, once it got commissioned by the BBC Online people and Radio 4 turned it down, was in a little bit of a rush, and I was disappointed with a lot of it. But again, I was just saying, this is to this is to that. This, if you put this thing in it, it looks like you're not making up as you go along, etc., etc., etc. Dan, for it is he, who was the writer, unbeknownst to me. That's another story. Did you want to know that story?
I know, but for everyone else, just
Tell all.
Dan said there's this writer called Colin Meek who's in New Zealand. That's just what he said to me. And he said he's quite shy or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, I was given the script. I thought it was an interesting script. And he said, well, you just email your thoughts to me and I'll email them to Colin Meek and he'll sort it out. And then he'd come back and I'd go, this is very Star Wars, this is too Star Wars, and he was going backwards and forwards. And as far as I knew, Colin Meek was a real person. And I was in the foyer in Los Angeles, and Robert Francis, we were all standing there, the BBC Online team, had flown over to Los Angeles to promote Death Comes to Time. It was pretty much in the can, actually. And Rob Francis jokingly said to Dan, in my presence, oh, we can put the entire team up on the website, we can do it behind the scenes, we can put the producer up and we can put the writer up. Of course, they'd be the same person. And I just stared at Dan, and then I just walked away very slowly. And then I jumped in the swimming pool, which was outside the back, and Dan followed me as I was doing lengths. He was walking around the pool as I was doing lengths. He goes, Nev, it's not like what it seems. And I didn't know. I did not know that Colin Meek was a fictional person.
So you wanted an honest critique?
Yes, that's what his argument was. And I said, look, if you wanted an honest critique, you should have said you'd written it, because I would have been far more brutal. Because I didn't know this guy, this Colin Meek guy. I mean, I was Fox for two reasons, because Dan didn't know a lot about Doctor Who, and I thought Death This Time was written by someone who knew a lot about the New Adventures, and a lot of that vibe was in there. But Dan did not, and it was just a huge coincidence. I mean, the second reason, well, three reasons. That was the first reason. The second reason I never suspected was that the comedy was the worst thing about it. The comedy was quite clumsy. And Dan was a comedian. He did the wildebeest stuff. His forte was comedy. So I thought, this guy is into his science fiction, this writer's into his Doctor Who. You know, he knows his Doctor Who. He knows his New Adventure stuff. His comedy's a bit clumsy, but okay. And the third reason was quite simple. Why would you bother? Why would you bother with this elaborate subterfuge? He told me the head of the comedy department had told everyone not to tell anyone he was writing it as well, which I thought was just nonsense. And again, I was completely flummoxed. And then we had this huge stand-up row, and that was kind of like, yeah. But Dan said, look, I'd understand if you wanted to walk away from the project. I said, well, we've just got this project off the ground. I've worked very hard on this project with Colin. And you think I'm walking away from this, and you've got another thing coming. But I knew nothing was going to come at Death This Time after it. But that was just an interesting little vignette. I script edited or advised on a series in which I did not know the identity of the writer. And I was talking to the writer about the writer. I was going, Colin's lost the plot here. To Dan. He's just like the Star Wars stuff. And Dan's going, oh, I'll tell Colin. I'll tell him. And the change will be made. But it was this kind of like weird relationship. Isn't that completely weird? Now, Dan's plans for Death of This Time changed in many different ways. Every time I heard the plans for what was going to carry on, I think we'd have a conversation, he'd think about what I'd said, and he'd come back with a revised plan. So I said, well, what's going to happen? The Doctor's going to die, right? And and he says, yeah, well, the Doctor's like kind of title, right? Rather than man. Like V for Vendetta, I should imagine. And Stephen Fry's going to take on the title of the Doctor, and it's going to travel on like that. And I go, right, okay. You started off this project trying to get rid of all the continuity you possibly could, and now you've suddenly tried yourselves in knots, trying to launch a TV series and a radio series based on a story from a podcast, which you're going to have to explain this is not the same character. You've invented a huge pile of continuity before you even started. And then Dan said, well, they're going to travel for a while, and then the Doctor's going to come back. And this was literally the conversation we had. That's all the stuff that was going on. There's going to have a couple of adventures with the Minister of Chance and a companion, and then the Doctor will be resurrected down the line. Those are the things he said to me. Obviously nothing came of that because the TV series proposal wasn't taken up, and obviously radio was dead. I don't know what's happening in the Minister of Chance by any way. I've not heard any of it. Is it good?
I didn't see it.
No, I was putting it on Twitter, but I haven't had a chance to listen to it.
All right.
yet.
I heard it's good. He's a good producer. His writing is odd, and I think there's a lot of Doctor Who writers, a lot of writers anyway in television and radio who like to start things off, who love to start scenes, who love to start stories, and they're not interested in the middle of them, so they start the story again, and then they start the story again. My feeling with Death of Time, it just kept starting. And if you've ever read the Dark Dimension lost script, the revival with Mad Adrian Wigglesworth, that's like that too. That's a lot of scenes, but they just start the story. They keep starting the story and starting the story. No one's got an act 2 in them, and everyone's got an act 1 in them, and no one has an act 2 in them. And I so work towards an end point when I'm a writer, and the measure of a good writer is you should have an idea where you're going. I mean, Russell's writing at a hell of a rate, but he knows where he's going. And a lot of people just think there's this cool entrance to make, a cool Doctor Who start, and that's all they have. And I'm not saying Death of Time did not have an end point. It certainly did, Death of the Doctor. But I just get the feeling that Dan had some momentum which he lost through the. I think the first pilot, the first episode was very strong, and I had a lot of input into that and shaping it, but it was all Dan really, or Colin. But the rest of it was written in a much greater hurry. I had a lot of ideas. I think the idea of him being called the Minister of Chance was really interesting because the Doctor Who was portrayed as, the Time Lords were portrayed as being a very ordered society. So I said, well, why can't the Time Lords find it? Because he's the Minister of Chance. So we should have more of the idea of chance. You know, the universe has an order, so why is he called the Minister of Chance? And this has not gone into. I thought, well, because he's so random. Like the Dice Man, because he's so random. That's why they can't be pursued. This is why it's so special, because he's the random element in the universe. And that didn't go anywhere. And I said a lot of good things in it, but I say it was like an episode that just kept starting and starting and starting.
So how did the Brigadier end up in the space shuttle? It was for a number of weeks. It did seem like it relaunched the series, and all of a sudden you had that huge continuity sweep with the Brigadier telling you.
I think that was me, I'm afraid, because I didn't lend in the invasion. See, Dan was big friends with Sylvester and Sophie, and he worked with them on stuff, and I think that was how the whole thing started, because he said, well, we should bring it back. And he thought at the time Sylvester was the current Doctor, or whatever. He just wanted to work with Sylvester and Sophie. And then when I lent in the invasion, he saw the character Brigadier, and I think he felt he could get hold of Nicholas Courtney, obviously because Sylvester couldn't get hold of him. So yeah, that was the story of one man's journey from continuity free to let's get the Brigadier in, which is the journey of every head of Doctor Who. It seems to be, you know, John Nathan-Turner starts off with nothing, and you end up with
Attack of the Cybermen.
Yeah, Attack of the Cybermen, continuity. Russell starts off with just a man in a box, just landing there, and you end up with stories that would make no sense to the casual viewer. And I think that's with science fiction in general. You start off from a tiny point, and the mythology just collects like a little, you know, like a dung beetle just rolls up the hill, and it gets bigger each time, you know.
Do you think Doctor Who can be continuity free?
I think Doctor Who stories can be continuity free. I think the main strength of Doctor Who is for the first 20 years, I think maybe the whole of the classic series, it's wore its continuity lightly. If you ever got annuals or the amazing book of Doctor Who, Terence Dix or whoever, explained to you the story of Doctor Who, he could explain it in 2 A4 pages. He's on the run from the Time Lords, he got exiled by the Time Lords, they let him go. And that was basically the story of Doctor Who for 15, 20 years. It's not Battlestar Galactica, is it? It's a simple thing that children can understand and adults can understand, and it's something you can write on the back of a fag packet. And Star Trek is at its best when you can write that story on the back of a fag packet. It's Wagon Train to the Stars. It's Sherlock Holmes in space. The story of Doctor Who was very, very simple. After 6 years, you found out who he was. Big deal. and he didn't change the damn thing. He got exiled. He still did the monsters and thing. If you get weighed down with too many characters, yes, it does get to be a problem. But you don't have to do that with Doctor Who because you've just got these elements. You don't go into it. I mean, Terror Sticks and Malcolm Hall's War Games is fantastic. It's the simplest thing you can possibly do. Okay, they're Time Lords. They're Lords of Time. They travel in time, and they're Time Lords. That's it. That's really it. And you don't have anything, you have to do anything else with it. That's it. And you can put any kind of imprint on them you like. You can make them bureaucrats, you can make them warlords, you can make them tyrants, you can make them bumblers. But it's really, that is Origins now. Go away. That's it. You know. Okay, Doctor Who, he's a Time Lord. Okay, that's it.
Stephen Moffat, I think, when he came over and took control, tried to reset it. Of course, he still found himself burdened by all that continuity. And the end of the last series, he almost seems to try and reset it again, get rid of all that stuff that...
I think is a problem. This is a personal thing. When a lot of fans, a lot of people who are aware of the legacies take it over, and Doctor Who becomes Doctor Who for them. You know, the idea of a hero with a capital H. The idea that everyone knows him. We all know Doctor Who because we follow the TV series, but the universe, I don't think you really should.
Yeah.
It's the idea that he fights the monsters, and that's kind of like a job description. I mean, when we started, he didn't. And you get into all kind of moral problems when you take kids from Earth, and you go, right, I'm fighting the universe now, who's with me? It's that kind of, why are you putting these people in danger, which is what the later series has addressed. When it started, it was just a fight for survival. William Hartnell and his two school teachers and his granddaughter just, you know, travelling from one disaster to another. That's the noise of the TARDIS.
Sorry, we weren't going to disturb you.
So once you say the Doctor just actually goes and travels and finds evil, he's actually still taking these young kids with him, rather than just going, oh, we've landed somewhere in danger, we've got to get out of here really quickly, I want to get back to the TARDIS. It brings in its sense of moral problems to it. And the idea, I mean, it's like Columbo. Columbo's had about 80 episodes, and in every episode he found the murderer. If this was real life, he'd be head of the LAPD department by now. But you accept that. You accept Midsummer Murders has all these murders because that's your reality of your drama. You don't say, well, the Doctors saved the universe 83 times, therefore he is a star. He is the star of the universe. You don't. You don't accept that reality because that reality destroys your drama. You don't. I mean, if you looked at the laws of like Miss Marple, she's solving the murders. People would come to her. She'd have an agency. She'd be on television. She'd be on whatever parts of television then. She'd be a star. She'd be like Hercule Poirot. She wouldn't be a little person in Mary because the charm of her, she was a little nondescript, little old lady who slipped in between the cracks and no one really noticed that, like the second Doctor. So that's the point of her. But saying, well, she's done all these murders, therefore I will put my fan idea of what the reality of this is on. Therefore she's a star, therefore she's fantastic. Therefore everyone thinks she's fantastic. And yeah, I think that's a problem with Doctor Who. It's a way to go. I've written Doctor Who as a celebrity. That was at the end of Omega. It's a temptation for fans which is probably good to resist, but I can't say that I'm immune.
Do you think that something like Doctor Who or Star Trek or something that's got that sort of innate weight of being a cultural icon, I suppose, might be slightly better off if it is on some level owned or run, or having to justify its existence to people who don't care about it and will cancel it if it's not really good?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Again, these are personal opinions of mine. I always thought Doctor Who should come back the way it does. I mean, people obviously have issues with the continuity in it, but it is pitched to the whole country. It is pitched to everyone. And because of that, it always rose back. You can get self-indulgent, but you're not going to be like the X-Files, which just descends on the weight of its own. In very few series, you just don't know what's going on.
Because I'm just thinking about the kind of parabola that the series, that the revived series took, where there was definitely a point after a couple of years with David Tennant where it was obvious that it wasn't going to go anywhere anytime soon. That first series with Eccleston nobody knows if it's actually going to survive past the first year, so they have to make it really, really damn good, and they have to keep making it really, really damn good. But if it hits that point where it's going to come back next year because it's too big to let it go, at that stage it doesn't necessarily have to justify itself in the same way. I'm not saying that they necessarily got lazy or anything, but the temptation is there to just not have to think, is this going to get us cancelled? When you're safe, I don't know, it just seems like you can...
I think the story of every television program is, you can pick anyone, you pick Howard's Way, you can pick Hello Hello, where when jokes, after series 1, jokes become in-jokes, you get more characters, you get more returning characters, you get it feeding off itself. And I think that's every television program, that's not just Doctor Who and Star Trek. Every time, you can pick it, you can pick spooks, you can pick anything. It's by its nature, every piece of art, especially if it's a long-running piece of art, it feeds off itself. If you listen to an episode of The Archers, you'd make no sense to you at all if you've never listened to The Archers before, in a lot of ways. EastEnders was just, God, EastEnders in the first couple of years was so fresh, and then you got Frank coming back, you got Dirty Den coming back, you've got everyone coming back. As soon as they're out of Panto, they're back in EastEnders, and people returning, and you don't know where you're coming or you're going, and the extended families become more ridiculous because people are leaving and coming back, and the reasons for them leaving are so preposterous because you're the mother of these children and you're going away for 3 months. We know you're going to another series, you're doing a pantomime, but why are you going? Why are you leaving your children alone in the square? And then you stop trying because the logic of the situation just wears you down.
Is there a point then at which you think kind of a rest and a retcon does things good?
I think retcons are dreadful things. If you want to start again, it's that urge to start again, which I've just said, within a story, you want to start again, I'm speaking positively about Doctor Who. I think Doctor Who came back exactly as I wanted it, and despite a few missteps here and there, it's still exactly how I like it. It's ambitious. It does wear its continuity lightly when you compare it with other things.
Yeah.
There are episodes that I think are indifferent. There are episodes that feel like it's like 20,000 people put in work. But there's so much special about it, episode to episode, that I think it's great. I think it's no danger of being consumed. I think people are aware of the danger of being consumed, and they keep trying to row back from this. I know the urge to kind of write those in-jokes and to feed off itself. There's always that urge. There was a point that I had a couple of minutes ago. Yeah, I think having a mainstream audience really does help, and every producer, every writer going should say, oh, how do I entertain all these millions of people rather than these 30 people or these 400 people? I think Doctor Who is always aware of that. I think Stephen's very aware of that. Stephen wants to do what Stephen wants to do, and he wants to challenge the audience. And I like that because, the first series of Pertwee challenged the audience. All the Baker years challenged the audience. Robert Holmes wanted to challenge the audience. You might feel that it slightly goes in the wrong direction, but I think it's exactly what it should be. It's fun. It's ambitious. When Michael Gray actually forced him to have Doctor Who back from the Sylvester, he asked for Back to the Future. He got Time of the Rhine. This is Stephen Moffat doing a proper Back to the Future timey-wimey thing. And sometimes the threads get a bit frayed, but it's exactly what Doctor Who could have done with time travel. And I think that's great. But the thing is that Doctor Who, it can change. It can change, have a new direction. You're sick of Base of the Siege, you exile into Earth. You're sick of Quatermass, you leave Earth. You're sick of the Gothic horror. I think in the internet age we get wound up where the series is at the moment. But it will change in a year or so to something else. And that's the beauty of Doctor Who. If we had the internet in 1972, we're going, when is this unit thing ever going to end? What's going to... The mask for this thing, is this Doctor Who for us forever? What's going on,
When the Deadly Assassin it was very well criticised, the Deadly Assassin.
By fans.
By fans, yeah.
By fans. Because, what's going... this is the death of Doctor Who died for me today. He dies about 7 times, but, he's... I think we do get round up about where it is exactly that the series is exactly at. If the ratings are good and things are fine, then then that's fine.
Yeah,
We'll change.
hang in there because there'll be a new producer in a couple of years anyway, and it'll all go somewhere else again.
Yes.
That's the best because the original series, when it first started, they didn't really, they didn't really hark back too much with that. In the original series from like William Hartnell, Patrick Treat.
I made this point on a DVD extra just the other day that the funny is, there's not continuity in it because it's the story. It's not the story of Doctor Who. It's the story of Ian and Barbara and their fight to get back to work. So there's no backstory to exploit because their backstory is back on Earth and they can't get back to it. It's lost in space with Ian and Barbara. The very next episode after they leave, you start explaining where the Doctor comes from. You finish the chase, you start the time meddler. There's another Time Lord. There's another TARDIS. That's the minute the story starts being about Doctor Who and not about the companions. I just think it may be a coincidence, but I like to think it's Dennis Springer saying, right, what have I got left to talk about? Well, Ian and Barbara have gone, who else is in the TARDIS? Oh, you. Doctor Who. Because it wasn't about Doctor Who at the start. It was about this need for them to get back. He was the guy who made things happen, the guy with the shit, but it was Ian and Barbara's story. So I'm talking about Doctor Who all the time. I should talk about me. Still got a question about me.
Okay. With all the series that Big Finish write or produce audios for, like Sapphire and Steel and Stargate and things like that, is there any other shows that you would consider pitching for or writing out?
I would consider writing for.
Yeah, yourself.
I think they've pretty much done all the TV tie-ins they can do. They've got like 7 of them.
You finished Tripods.
Tripods, finished the Tripod. The anal fan in me, and I have got an anal fan in me at this very moment. It's quite painful. Wants them to finish the Tripods, yes. I think that probably is, but it's for no reason other than to finish it. I would never listen to it. I'm a writer. I don't think, I could remake that, I could do that. When Dark Shadows I've never heard about, and someone asked me to do a Dark Shadows, I go, okay, let's see, let's listen to this nonsense and see what story you can make of it. That should be a writer's approach. Like, the thing I felt strongly about, the thing I wanted to do was write a book and do this kind of angle, this script I didn't do, because I think there are things to say. If you said to me, oh, we're going to do Lost in Space on Big Finish, I go, okay, let me think about it, let me think about where to go, let me think about the angles, let me think about what to say about it. I think it should be you saying to me, I'm going to do this, I'm going to bring back the flip side of Dominic Hyde or Luna or Metal Mickey, and I'll go yes or no, depending on whether I think there's potential. But I don't have this burning urge to bring back Captain Zep.
But you wouldn't
Now
go
I'm thinking about it now.
You wouldn't go and write an episode of Sapphire, or you wouldn't think about writing another go.
What, if someone asked me?
Yeah.
Oh, it certainly would. If someone asked me, I'm just saying that should be the situation. He goes, well, we're bringing back Sapphire, and still we're doing all these things. Do you think you could do something on those terms? If it's all that kind of thing, it's like David said, I'd like to do a Companions Chronicle. I think you'd be good to do a Perry one. Oh, right. Okay. And David said, I think it'd be fun to do a story which started with Peter's Doctor and ended with Collins. And I go, I've got just the idea for you. And that's how it should work. It shouldn't be me going with this kind of, Sergeant Benton story. I got a Sergeant. I don't know. I think maybe I'm like, say Nick Mayer said, I don't come up with the stories. I need to be primed. And not much me to say Star Trek shit, make it good. I go okay. And Star Trek shit again, make it good again. Okay. And I think that I have the Nick Mayer brain. I go okay. I'll do this for you. Okay.
With that in mind, a Mervyn Stone question. Were you sort of primed for Mervyn Stone in some way? Or was that very much kind of, well, I want to write a book, what do I want to write a book about?
Good question. I think I was primed by my love of detective mystery fiction, and then I thought about what I could write about. That is a good point. But when you start something yourself, it takes a long time. And luckily for me, I just did it for my own amusement for quite a long time, quite a phrase. For several years, I just thought, well, it'd be quite fun. I'll write a couple of chapters and see where it goes. And then I eventually primed myself by setting myself a challenge, because I started writing a murder mystery and I found it was quite hard.
That makes me feel a lot better about the 3 or 4 notes and 3 or 4 novels that I've had for years. They sit there guilt tripping me, and knowing that you've had something wrapping around for however many years, and then you've gone, no, it's ready, it's done now. I can make something of this. But
this book is 80,000 words long. I cut 60,000 words out of it, chunks and things. The victim the first victim was originally the murder. The murder was called Mervyn Randall. Fantasy Michael. All the characters. you kill your babies a bit at a time. And I started to say, I quite like to write murder mystery, and then I started setting challenges for myself, saying, I've got to make this a really good one. Because when you go in, like, oh, yeah, I'm writing an okay murder mystery now, but I want to make it a really good one, so I rejigged it, and chucked out stuff. I'm a very brutal man when I'm writing. If anything starts to bore me, I just cut it out, and I find a lot of problems with some, when I hear some audios, when I hear some things like that. I think people are writing stuff that they think they should. You know, there's the bit when the doctor gets captured, and the bit where this happens, and the bit when the guy explains the plot. You're just writing Doctor Who because what you think Doctor Who is. You're not writing stuff that interests you. And I do brutally cut things quite. I mean, there are passages in the Mervyn Stone books that have gone out because I thought, I'm just writing this because someone else has done this, and it's quite funny, but it's boring me. In the second book I gave Mervyn a sidekick who went undercover in a kind of like religious cult, and actually started believing in the religious cult, which I thought was amusing. When I started writing, I go, no, this has been done, I'm bored with this, and then just cut the character completely. It just bores me, and the measure of how good I think something I've written is I listen to it again, and I listen to the chunks that I like again. And with Perry and the Piscon Paradox, I can listen to almost all of it again and again because I like it. With Kingmaker, I can listen to about 40% of it and then go on board with this now. This bit, that's the bit that I was bored writing. Well, I liked it, and now I'm bored with it. So it's a good measure. There are episodes of Dead Ringers which I listened to about 20 times, not as a narcissistic way because I just loved it. And there are episodes I go, well, that was shit, I'm never going to listen to that again. And that's the measure of how good how you think how well you've written. You know, an episode of Dead Ringers, I just listen to it and go, well, that was badly edited, that was badly written. I am never ever going to listen to that episode again. But there was something where I just thought, I just want to listen to that one again because I thought it was so damn good.
You said that was a good question. That was a fantastic answer.
So I read another crawler.
Sure. Having thoroughly enjoyed the Kingmaker several times.
Oh, thank you.
Looking to work with back and back.
Oh.
Are you doing more work for Big Finish?
Yeah, well, between things, I always did a Lost Story, which has got postponed, which may yet happen. I did pitch for a Companions Chronicles because they begged me to, and then it got turned down because it was too jokey and they did ask me to write a Mervyn Stone audio, and we agreed on doing a Mervyn Stone audio. And this is an interesting thing about medium. I tried to write it, and I tried to write it 4 times over, and I just couldn't. But I think I've got it cracked now. So I'm currently writing a Mervyn Stone audio. Whether they can, this has been a year though, so whether they're going to say, well, it's changed now, we don't want it anymore, because I'm not going to tell them I finished it until I've finished it. I hate the right thing and go, yeah, I'm really writing it, I'm having it in 2 months, no 3 months, no 6 months. I'm just not going to tell them until I've finished it. So it could just sit there in script and I can just put in something. But yeah, that's what I'm currently writing. I'm writing a Mervyn Stone audio. I'm also writing 2 Mervyn Stone new novels, but they are literally no hurry, no deadline. I'm just working on them myself because I think that's the best way to do it for me at the moment. I'm just saying, I've got these 2 great ideas I want to do. I want to get them right. This is my difficult 4th and 5th albums. I want to make them as good as the first 3 books. So I'm not going to pressure myself by saying, you must publish me by Christmas. I'm not going to do that again. I'm just going to get the idea right in my head. What time are we?
Right, we've got, I think, if you want to do another reading, we can wrap it up,
yeah.
And then we can carry on tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll read some more.
Because you've got these.
This is
another.
Whether
he likes it or not.
That's what same question again.
Yeah.
I'll read some more bits. This is another character. If you read, this is like this is an interesting point. This is a character you'll get if you're a Doctor Who fan, this is also a character that will resonate with anyone who picks it up. This is a super fan. But again, this is the kind of thing, it has to work on two levels. You have to portray the person as a character that anyone picks this book up. I get this guy, I understand who this is. This is DVD extras include Murder. Mervyn is recorded DVD commentary. He's just getting to the studio, and there's two people blocking his way. Just when the corridors couldn't get any narrower, their way was blocked by two figures having a very animated discussion that was teetering on the edge of a stand-up row. One was the short, stocky and bald form of Robert Mulberry. Mervyn considered the distinctive goatee beard that sprouted out of his chin a useful metaphor for Robert's famously bristly temper. Mervyn had already done quite a few DVD commentaries with Robert. Many of the less personality-challenged Vixen's fans had managed to get jobs where they could live out their fantasies. Mervyn found them everywhere: magazine editors, actors, writers, special effects technicians, and, in the case of Robert, DVD producers. Mervyn wondered why, with so many fans and powerful jobs in the media, he still couldn't get any work. The other man towered over him. He had a huge bald head and a big greying beard, like an angry Father Christmas. It was a very familiar form. Like Robert, he was another professional fan, and a far less welcome one. Oh God, it's Graham Goldingay. Graham was a super fan, an odd character who managed to inveigle his way into the lives of ex-members of the Vixen's production team. A founder member of VAS, the Vixen's Appreciation Society, he turned out to be a shrewd businessman, starting a small production company. Soon he was making all manner of Vixen's-related merchandise, cheap videos comprising interviews with the stars and low-budget dramas, all featuring actors from Vixen's. When he was on his uppers, Mervyn had been persuaded to write a few, a decision he deeply regretted. The problem with Graham was, once he got a celebrity's name safely in his Rolodex, the phone never stopped ringing. Requests to attend dinners, appeals for old scripts, demands for interviews. The word no wasn't in his dictionary. Neither were the words perhaps, maybe, and possibly. In fact, the word yes barely counted, unless it was coupled with the word now. As the years passed, Graham's tin pot operation grew into an impressive media empire. Now he had money and time to pursue his first love in grandiose ways, hosting celebrity auctions, celebrity dinners, and celebrity cricket matches, all Vixen's themed and all for charity. The demands on Mervyn and other fading stars grew ever more extravagant and ever harder to turn down. Now it looked like Robert was on the receiving end of Graham's brutish and demanding personality. Graham was throwing words out like fists, punctuating his argument with a meaty finger, which he jabbed in Robert's shoulders. You need me, Robert. I am essential personnel, and only I am qualified to host this, he said. I personally saved the studio edits in '93 from the cutting room floor and successfully bought the shooting scripts from Nicholas Everett last year. Graham, I don't... Robert tried to reply, but Graham mowed into him, chopping Robert's words into little pieces. I can recite the words not only to the broadcast version, but the unedited non-broadcast version, the 3 drafts before that, and the original spec proposal, where Professor Daxadar was originally called Professor Dexadin, before it was changed because it sounded too much like a prescription painkiller. Graham was always angry about something or other. When he first met him, Mervyn was reminded of the old out-of-date atlases he used in school, the pink bits denoting the British Empire, perfectly matching the colour of Graham's furious complexion. In fact, once Mervyn started to think of him in geographical terms, he found he couldn't stop. Every time he met him, Graham's face seemed to look more and more like an ordnance survey map of England and Wales. Just as the Pennine Mountains bisect the North Country, Graham's forehead was split in two by a craggy frown, meandering down from the top of his huge bald cranium to rest between tiny murderous eyes, nestling close together, or, as Mervyn thought of them, Manchester and Sheffield. His swollen nose grew out beneath them in a way that could only be described as Birmingham. And all 3 features were sandwiched between huge damp cheeks, East Anglia on one side and Wales on the other. Completing the effect was a huge hairy mole that squatted on the left side of his mouth, exactly where London would be. Ironically, just as the country's capital sucked attention away from the regions, so too did Graham's mole. When talking to him, your eyes were inexorably dragged away from his face and towards his large brown growth. As he reached them, Graham Goldingay broke abruptly from arguing with Robert and proffered an outstretched hand to Mervyn. Quite why Graham picked him out to greet wasn't clear, and the mystery alone caused Mervyn to flinch slightly before reluctantly resting his hand in the middle of Graham's slab-like paw. Graham immediately started firing off meaningless sentences in all directions, like a local radio DJ terrified of leaving dead air. Greetings, I'm Graham Goldingay. Pleasure to meet you. We have met before several times, but you probably don't remember. I do, though. I love Andrew's book about you. You must sign my copy. Terrible about Simon. I never liked him, but you never wished that on your worst enemy. And I suppose he was my worst enemy. So therefore, for the grace of God go I. As you're aware, there's been some kind of mix-up. We're in the process of sorting it out. I'll be conducting the commentary for today. You will not, said Robert hotly, his shiny head blushing into a beetroot-coloured fury. As you can see, there's a bit of a mix-up, but I'm sure we can sort it out. Graham, I told you that you're not conducting the commentaries. We don't need anyone to conduct the commentaries. We only do that if we're doing programmes from the 50s and 60s where the guests have gone a bit... He realised he was in polite company, where a lot of time has passed and the guests might not have complete recall of events and don't have sufficient grasp of all the details of the original recording. Look, Robert, you are producing an inferior product without me because I have expert knowledge that will turn this DVD into one of your bestsellers of all time. I will complain to the BBC. Graham, this is a ZAP production. I am managing director of ZAP. The only reason we're here is because I, as managing director of ZAP, have decided to hire BBC facilities. Complaining to the BBC will do you no good. I am offering my services for free and for gratis here, and you'll be being deliberately and willfully incompetent by passing this up. Robert had had enough. Trevor, will you put a call down to the front desk and ask them to send a couple of security people? We have an intruder here who is interfering with a recording session. Trevor started to move, but Graham held up his huge hands in surrender. All right, you've made your point, Robert, but let me tell you, you might be king of the castle in this bit of corridor, but out there will be repercussions, mark my words. Graham lumbered off in bad grace, giving a final booming response. You'll be hearing from my blog in due course.